Well, that was very interesting. Now let's go on to our second speaker. Architect Tamar Lev-On graduated from Tel Aviv University and Kingston University, London. She is a lecturer at HIT Xulon, skilled as a multimedia artist, architect, and designer. Tamar's work is presented through a variety of media and installation, which include both 2D and 3D works. She regularly participates in exhibitions in Israel and abroad, including in two Venice Biennales, 2009 and 2011. In her journey, Tamar mainly explores fictional narratives, alongside histories, masquerading, and space structuring. She is an avid believer in collaborations, art education, and contribution. In HIT, she focuses on teaching the interfaces of art and architecture. Welcome, architect Tamar Lev-On.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, thank you. Firstly, apologies for not being with you on site on the studio. I'm a little unwell, so doing this from my home in Tel Aviv. So let's start. I'm Tamar Lev-On. I'm an artist. I'm a member of the P8 Cooperative Gallery in Tel Aviv, an architect, designer, and a lecturer here at the HIT Design Faculty. So as a starting point, I have no one specific field of practice. Rather, everything I do is a meeting point of various fields, which can be fruitful and synergetic, but the different inputs can also contradict or even obstruct each other. So these dilemmas of the contradictions are what lead my practice and life. If you talk about life, it exists within those stitches and the meeting points between the rigid path and the fluid one. We can call it a grid of land, of pre-planned and structured areas, and of the ocean, which is fluid and liberated and imaginative, such as the meeting point between the architecture and the art. So if I'm stretching this metaphor a little further, I can say that it's like the meeting between fact and fiction, or between the truth and the false. And in this realm, between the architecture, art, fact, fiction, and truth, I make my art. So Scrutinium is the first of the two projects I'm about to share with you today. It's the final show of my MFA Fine Art from 2007. It presented an archive documenting a murder that took place at the gallery site called the Barge House, and trying to solve it. Now, the project began with me finding a newspaper front page that was telling the story of Lord Henry Kent, who owned a shipping company that was located at the Barge House, which is the gallery site. But what really caught my eye was a photo of his daughter, Lady Alison Kent, who looked exactly like me. So from there on, I started investigating and collecting evidences and setting them up as a historical archive, as you can see here. This project is a grid. It's a grid of local histories with folklore and storytelling. And another thing that I can tell you about it now is that it's all completely fake, from scratch. The story, characters, storylines, newspaper, everything is fake. Now, why? The show was the outcome of my paper, The Artist is a Liar, that I wrote at Kingston University. And it discussed whether the artist, myself, is morally obliged to my audience when I present them with the art that claims to be telling the truth. So in my opinion, when someone encounters a work of art that's accompanied with a documentary promise, such as based on a true story title at the beginning of a film, they immediately get closer to the work. Presenting an art piece as reliable removes filter of disbelief and create identification of the viewer. So the artist can easily engage with explosive themes and criticize them without being caught. I'm doing this for over a decade now and creating fictions. And then I'm taking these fictions and using them to remap actual themes, places, and events. Both of the projects we see here are using reliable aesthetics with text and image. Each project has a complex structure that meets other fields such as history writing, local culture, or politics, and deciphering the piece confronts the viewer with those parallel fields. So this actually creates another example of a grid that starts with the site-specific area, which is the space, actually, the location, the history, the stories that took place there that I study and respect. But then I add up my own narratives with concepts and ideas that allow me to bring in some of my own criticism and are being read as part of the storyline. And if I'm taking this back to Scrutinium, I mentioned it to be a grid, but the third element of the grid that creates the conflict between the first two is the material, is the element of material. The people and the events in this piece are all fabricated, and so is the material that is used to portray them. I'm using acrylic for oil, paper stands for fabric, the paper is handwritten, hand-printed, etc. So what does it mean? I mean, it means that the physical archive itself, to begin with, is fake. So I'm attacking the viewer's perception and asking what is stronger. Is it the physical evidence or the words, the written words? And asking what would fail me, the artist, in the eyes of the viewer, what would give it away? The second project is Legend. Legend is my artist book. It was published about over a year ago, supported by Mifal Hapais, the Israeli lottery. Babies. It's in fact an exhibition hidden within a book format. Now, the word legend is fascinating as it expresses exactly what we discussed so far. It can stand for a story or a fable, but it can also stand as a symbolic and graphic code or a map or on an architectural drawing. So again, it's the fluid against the rigid, the concrete against the imagined, all in this one word, legend. The book itself is a local fable. It's suggesting an alternative Israeli history throughout the 20th century between the modern and the postmodern in the realm of the what if. The book includes 40 fictitious characters and their written biographies, 30 related works of art, as well as 20 short stories that were contributed to the book by renowned writers. Now, the reading experience reveals the open structure of the book. It's open-ended. The reader can choose where to begin and in which order to build the narrative and connect the characters to each other, as there's no hierarchy. Now, the artistic ingredients in the book make a long stream of consciousness. There are collages, manipulated photos, drawings, paintings, objects, and findings. Now, the plots and the people together create a reality that echoes Israel as we know it. It's filled with the references, and it invites the reader to understand this place, the Israeli condition, as something that's repeating itself, like a repeating history. The made-up relationship themselves act as a legend to our own lives here, touching various themes such as culture, politics, industry, economy, corruption, and grief. For me, it's the optimal expression of the grid that we discussed so far. I consider it to be a depth grid or a three-dimensional web of facts and fabrications. It's practically a personal tour through the people, art, and text. And these three elements expand and clash. It all starts with the biographies, with the fictional characters that are based either on something that I made up, the fictional ones, or the real characters, and they are the basis to the new narrative that is also filled with half-truths and includes politics, culture, history, and more. The stories are based on the characters. At first I wrote the biographies, and then I approached writers and sent them the biographies, asking them to respond with a short text. I received over 20 fantastic responses that are different in genre and styles. So in the book we have stories, letters, newspapers, diaries, and more. The art pieces, they function partly as a mediator between facts and fiction, but mostly they help us understand and decipher the plot better. They act as a subconscious to the stories and characters. And just another word, if we think about the era we live in now, if we take this grid and add up the media and the news coverage, then we actually get the here and now that we live in a place or times that are supposed to be genuine. So let's walk through some of the characters in the book. It all begins with me being a collector. Part of what I collect is old photos. So the starting point was this photo of a group of children in Shoshana kindergarten celebrating Purim, the Israeli, the Jewish holiday. I named all the 17 protagonists and matched them to the second photo of the same kids 16 years later. And later on I drew two legends for both photos, numbering and naming the characters. From the 17 heroes, the plot extended, and I wrote another 23 characters, part family members, friends, or associates. Now, deciding how the character look is a very interesting work. I had photos for the 17 children, the first ones, and the remaining portraits are either taken from different photos that I later used for the book, or might even be a Google search. I could, if a character plays the violin or is a politician or a spy, I would Google it, Google image it, and then see what kind of images come up and find the right character. So together they create a take on a family tree, which again is a graphic representation, a legend for this story. Let's take a peek of some of the characters and narratives inside of legend. Twin sisters, Yafa and Chaviva Fomenko, are a good place to talk about naming a character. The two of them are simplified into feminine archetypes. Yafa, the word Yafa in Hebrew is pretty. So indeed, she is a beauty queen. And her sister, Chaviva, when Chaviva is nice or likable, is indeed a smart and kind sister who works as a nurse. And their surname, Fomenko, is a Romanian origin. Now, I'm fascinated by the concept of twins, two people who are one, or one person who is actually two. It also fits the theme of duplications and pairing that I explore throughout the book with the art. So in this piece, you can see reflections, distortions, and black and white that are all the backdrop of two older couples, German Aldea and Johanna, and Romanian Nelo and Danot. The two of them are married to each other in between. And one couple is the parents of Yafa and Chaviva we met before. Now the picture of them, I found both pictures you see here in two different stalls at one flea market. They basically show the same couple, just taken a few years apart, but I've decided that there are two different sets of twins that are married to each other, and this is how the plot line was born. So the husbands name their spouses Queen of Heart and Queen of Diamond, as if they are one playing card sharing the same body. Or if they are being a dragon, a mythical dragon with two heads, holding a diamond and a pounding heart. Now later on, the sisters fell apart over the German payments issued to the Holocaust survivors. And that's an example of how real Israeli local history penetrates the invented plot. Now returning to Yafa, Here's another medium used by another writer for the book. It's a fake interview from a ladies' magazine she gave after winning the beauty pageant. Here in this page, the testosterone page, we meet two of Yafa's lovers, both based on actual Israeli people. One of them is a singer who was active in Israel in the 40s, and the other one is a criminal. This one is one of the findings that I obviously made for the book. It's a handkerchief with the symbol of the criminal's organization that's called the Bleeding Rose. Here we meet Esther and Moni, the other pair of twins, the cousins of Yafa and Chaviva. They have inherited some lands in Rishon LeZion and always dreamt of unusual amusement parks. So they team up with Shmuel, which is another one of the 17 initial characters. And together, the three embark on an adventure, playing a roller coaster park based on the behavior of waterbirds. Through this storyline, I can touch ideas such as the Israeli water crisis and the security industry. This is a prototype for one of the roller coaster tracks, designed by Shmuel. And here he's interviewed for the magazine Wild Birds, where he talks about the design principles that led him to both designing the rides and earlier on to designing advanced weapon system for the Israeli Defense Force. Now, between the people who read the interview, we find Dvorah Greenwald, which is another one of the 17 original kids. Now, her family once owned an animal shop that they had to give up. In a beautiful letter written for the book by author Ishai Sarid, she misinterprets the plans and asks Shmuel and the twins to become their partner in planning a park for birds. And she ends up the letter by asking to live with the birds on their side. I'd also like to mention Daniel Zabo and Batya Philipson, both young dancers, who gave me the opportunity to dive into the world of botanical drawing while telling their stories. One time as a dancing branch of dancers and flowers, and the second time in the memorial page that I called Cancer Flowers, which covers all the characters that are basically killed in the book. The last one I'd like you to meet in the current climate is Yuri. Yuri immigrated to Israel as a young boy with his parents. They are researchers who performed clinical trials on various ethnic groups, and Israel was exactly the place to find such a diversity. But Yuri was always afraid of germs. The talented Geula Shina writer wrote a short story about Yuri that opens like this. Germs. Everybody thinks war is the scariest thing, but they are all wrong. The scariest are the germs. They even survive war. Not one war, wars. World War I, II, the third one as well. Not to mention small wars of small countries, such as Israel. A country as small as a germ. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your fascinating talk. Can you tell us a little bit about your personal journey?
My personal journey?
Through the grid?
Oh, it's exactly as I opened the talk. I started studying architecture, but earlier I studied a little bit of graphic design. And while studying architecture, I was already a graphic designer. And then at my second degree, I flew to London to make art. So it's always there. Everything, all those fields are mixed up together. And in my art creation, you can always see some kind of a special design or aspect. And also in my work as an architect beforehand, I think it was a little bit creative.
Okay, so thank you very much. We wish you well.
Thank you.
And take care. Thank you.